Ace stopped. The German Shepherd froze mid-stride in the crowded Westfield Mall, ears snapping upright, like radar dishes locking onto a signal. Around him, Saturday shoppers flowed past in waves of laughter and chatter. But the 7-year-old K9 police dog saw something they didn't. A little girl. 7 years old, maybe 8. She stood beside a man in a gray suit, her right hand behind her back. Her fingers moved, thumb tucked into palm, 4 fingers closing over it. The international distress signal. Ace's body went rigid. His tail stopped mid-wag. A low rumble built in his chest as his eyes locked onto the girl's face. Fear lived there, swimming beneath a mask of forced calm. No one else noticed. Except Ace. And what this dog did next would change everything. Before we continue, hit like and subscribe. Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing where our stories reach. Ace wasn't just any police dog. For 5 years, the German Shepherd had worked the streets with a record most officers would envy. 47 drug busts, 8 missing persons found. But his real specialty was something harder to quantify. He could read fear. Not the obvious kind, the screaming and running, the quiet kind, the kind that hid behind smiles and silence. Officer Sarah Mitchell had learned to trust that instinct without question. At 32, she'd spent 5 years as Ace's handler, and in all that time, he'd never been wrong. Not once. When Ace reacted, there was always a reason, even when she couldn't see it yet. 2 years ago, he'd refused to leave an apartment during a routine wellness check. The place looked empty. Sarah's partner wanted to move on, but Ace planted himself in front of a bedroom door and wouldn't budge. They found a 3-year-old boy locked inside, dehydrated but alive, while his mother lay unconscious in the bathroom from an overdose. Sarah had said it then, and she believed it now. Ace didn't just smell danger. He felt it. Today was supposed to be simple. Weekend patrol at the mall. High-foot traffic meant high visibility, a deterrent for pickpockets and troublemakers. Nothing complicated. Nothing that required Ace's particular gift. But his body language told a different story. Every muscle in his frame had gone tense, his focus absolute. Sarah followed his gaze to the girl in the pale blue dress, standing next to the man with the briefcase. The girl's hand was behind her back, fingers moving in a pattern Sarah almost missed. And everything about this situation felt wrong. What every year of training, every hour with Ace had taught her to recognize, screamed one word: danger. The man looked normal. That was the problem. Mid-40s, graying hair cut neat and professional, dark suit, polished shoes, a leather briefcase with double combination locks. He could have been anyone, a businessman, a father, someone you'd pass without a second glance. But Sarah had learned to look past surfaces. The man's hand gripped the girl's wrist, too tight. Not guiding, controlling. The skin around her small wrist showed red, the kind of mark that came from sustained pressure. The girl never looked at him. Her eyes stayed down, fixed on the floor tiles, and when people walked too close, the man pulled her against his side like he was shielding something valuable. Or hiding it. The briefcase drew Ace's attention. His nose twitched, nostrils flaring as he processed scents the human world couldn't detect. The locks weren't normal for someone out shopping. They were the kind you used when you couldn't afford to lose what was inside. Sarah's radio crackled softly at her hip. She kept her voice low, barely above a whisper. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Possible situation at Westfield, 2nd floor, near the food court. Request backup. Plain clothes. No sirens." The response came back. "Copy that, Unit 7. 2 units en route. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Sarah watched the man check his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't shopping. He was waiting. And he'd positioned himself near the emergency exit, not the stores. when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen but didn't answer. His jaw tightened. Whatever message he'd received, it wasn't good news. Sarah had been a cop long enough to know. When a child couldn't look at the adult holding her hand, it wasn't shyness, it was fear. Ace moved before Sarah gave the command. The leash pulled taut as he closed the distance, 2 meters becoming 1. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply sat, positioning himself directly in the man's line of sight, and locked eyes with the girl. Sarah let the leash extend. She'd learned years ago that Ace's positioning was never random. When he chose a spot, it meant something. The girl noticed him immediately. Her gaze flickered to the German Shepherd, and for one brief second, something changed in her expression. Hope. Raw and desperate. It flashed across her face before she caught herself and looked away, but Ace had seen it. Sarah had seen it. The girl's hand behind her back moved again. The same signal, held longer this time. Thumb tucked in, 4 fingers closing over. Then her eyes found Ace once more, and this time they stayed there. A silent plea that needed no translation. The man shifted his weight. His free hand went to his collar, tugging at it despite the mall's cool air conditioning. Sweat beaded at his hairline. When he turned to browse a nearby display, his movements were too deliberate, too controlled. Someone trying very hard to appear casual. Ace's training kicked in. His ears flattened slightly. The rumble in his chest started low, a frequency humans could barely hear, but felt in their bones. This was the sound he made when he detected a high-risk individual. Sarah had heard it maybe 8 times in 5 years. She stepped closer, keeping her approach non-threatening, and watched as the girl's bottom lip began to tremble. The child's collar sat slightly askew, and beneath the fabric, Sarah caught a glimpse of something that made her blood run cold. A bruise. Purple-yellow. The shape is unmistakable. Fingerprints. An adult's fingerprints wrapped around a child's throat. The girl looked down at Ace. Then, with movements so small, they could have been missed in a blink, she did something that changed everything. Her left hand dropped from behind her back, and one finger extended toward the man's briefcase. Then her hand moved through the air, tracing a shape. 1, 2. Ace watched every motion. His eyes tracked her finger as she finished the number in empty space. 12. She was telling him 12. Then her hand went back into position, thumb tucked in, fingers folded over. The distress signal returned, held steady like an anchor. Only Ace caught it. Sarah was too far to the side, her angle wrong. The man hadn't noticed because he'd turned to scan the crowd, checking for something or someone. But Ace had seen, and his body language shifted immediately. He stood, moved toward the briefcase. His nose went to work, inhaling deeply, processing layers of scent the way a computer processes data. His reaction was instant and unmistakable. Ears pinned back completely, lips curling just enough to show teeth. The low rumble became a growl, sustained and serious. This was the alert he gave for narcotics, for weapons, for human remains. This briefcase contained something dangerous, the man noticed. His eyes went wide, and his hand jerked the briefcase away from Ace's range. "Control your dog," he said, his voice tight. Sarah's hand moved to her hip, resting near her service weapon. "Sir, I'm going to need you to open that briefcase." "I don't have to do that. This is private property. And this is a public safety concern. Open the briefcase, or I'll detain you while we get a warrant." The girl's hands began to shake. The man's grip on her wrist tightened, and she made a small sound. Not quite a whimper, not quite a gasp. Something caught between pain and terror. Then, from inside the briefcase, came a sound that stopped everyone within earshot. Muffled. Desperate. A phone was ringing, and through its speaker came the unmistakable sound of a child crying. The man moved fast. Too fast. He yanked the girl toward the emergency exit, the briefcase swinging in his other hand, the phone inside still transmitting desperate cries. But Ace was faster. The German Shepherd lunged forward, placing his body between the man and escape, teeth bared, a bark erupting that echoed through the second floor like a warning siren. Sarah's hand went to her weapon. "Stop right there. Hands where I can see them." Two uniformed officers appeared from the crowd, moving in from opposite directions. The man froze, trapped, his face drained of color, and the briefcase slipped from his fingers, hitting the tile with a dull thud. The crying from inside grew louder. The girl's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, her entire body convulsing in waves. Moisture tracked down her cheeks. The first release she'd allowed herself since Ace had found her. Her hand finally dropped from behind her back, but her fingers stayed locked in that signal. Thumb pressed into palm, as if releasing it might erase her from existence. Sarah knelt beside her, voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe now. Your name?" The girl's mouth opened. Nothing. Her lips quivered. She forced sound past the blockage in her throat. Emma. What happened, Emma?" Emma's eyes darted to the man being cuffed by backup officers. Raw terror flashed across her face. "He said if I called for help, he'd hurt the others. Make them disappear." "Others?" "At the cold place. Ocean smell. 10 or 12 of us. 3 days ago he took me. Said I looked normal enough to test moving us in public." Her voice fractured. "My teacher showed us a video about the hand signal, for when you can't talk. I thought no one would see. But your dog saw." Ace moved closer. He lowered his head, placing it gently on Emma's lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his fur, her body releasing sobs that had been trapped for 72 hours. Sarah's jaw tightened. She gestured to the backup officers. "Get that briefcase open." Inside, they found 3 cell phones, a notebook filled with addresses, photos of different children, 12 in total, and a small bracelet with a name engraved on it. Sophie, age 8. One of the phones was still active, its screen lit. An incoming call from an unknown number. Through the speaker, faint crying could still be heard before the call disconnected. Someone on the other end had been listening. Someone now knew their courier had been caught. Emma whispered into Ace's fur. Cold place, planes overhead, smelled like oil. Sarah understood immediately. This wasn't just one kidnapping. This was infrastructure. And they had less than 2 hours before someone realized their transporter had been compromised. The man refused to speak. His wallet said, David Miller. Fingerprints revealed Richard Hayes, convicted of human trafficking in 2013, released 2 years ago. Sarah stood across from him in the mall's security office, Ace beside her, watching. Richard Hayes, 10 years for trafficking, out for 2. And here you are again. Lawyer. Those kids don't have time for your legal rights. Where are they? I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah leaned forward. Emma is 7, missing 3 days. We have 12 photos in your briefcase, children missing across 3 states. We have your notebook, everything we need. Richard's face remained blank. No guilt, no remorse. Cold calculation. Tell us where they are. Get my lawyer. Then he smiled. Thin, cold, a smile that confirmed Sarah's suspicion. He wasn't the top, and if he went down, someone higher would erase the evidence, along with the children. They moved Richard toward the police vehicle in the underground parking garage. 2 officers flanked him, hands on his arms. Sarah walked ahead with Ace. Standard procedure, routine transfer. Richard's cuffs weren't locked tight. Not a mistake, a choice. He'd convinced the younger officer his wrists were hurting, played the cooperative suspect. The moment they reached the vehicle, he twisted hard, yanking his right hand free. His elbow caught the officer's jaw, and the man stumbled back. Richard ran. Not toward the exit, toward the emergency stairwell. Ace didn't wait for the command. The German Shepherd exploded forward, paws hammering concrete, closing the gap in 3 seconds, flat. Richard's hand reached the door handle. Ace's jaws closed on his jacket collar, yanking backward, with enough force to lift the man off his feet. They hit the ground together. Richard swung wildly, his fist connecting with Ace's shoulder. Ace shifted, released the collar, and clamped down on Richard's forearm, not breaking skin. Not yet. But the pressure was absolute, inescapable. Sarah arrived, weapon drawn. "Don't move." 2 more officers swarmed in, forcing Richard flat. The cuffs went back on, double-locked this time. Richard spat blood from where he'd bitten his own tongue in the fall. "That dog attacked me. I'll sue." Sarah holstered her weapon. "You assaulted an officer and attempted escape. Ace stopped a fleeing suspect. That's his job." During a thorough search, an officer found something sewn into the lining of Richard's jacket. A key, not a house key, a container key, stamped with the number W47. The key changed everything. Within 20 minutes, the forensics team had traced it to an abandoned shipping yard 15 kilometers from the mall. Container W47 was registered as destroyed 3 months prior, but the key was new, recently cut. Someone was still using it. Back at the station, the tech unit worked through Richard's phones. 3 devices, each with a different purpose. One for personal use, one for encrypted messages. One that contained nothing but a single repeating conversation with a contact labeled only as Zed. The messages were coded, but the pattern was clear. Dates, numbers, locations. The tech specialist, a woman named Jennifer, pulled up the decoded log and went pale. "This isn't just trafficking. This is a supply chain. 42 pickups in the last 8 months across 5 states, all children between 6 and 14. Sarah studied the screen. Each entry followed the same format: a date, a number representing how many children, a location code, and a status. Emma's entry read, "In transit, confirmation pending." Sophie's entry, the girl whose bracelet they'd found, showed, "Transferred, payment received." At the bottom of the notebook they'd recovered from the briefcase, there was a handwritten note. November shipment, 12 units. Delivery point, TBA. Units. They were calling children units. The FBI arrived within the hour. Agent Morrison, a man in his mid-50s with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, took charge of the room. "This operation connects to at least 3 international trafficking cases we've been tracking. Your suspect is a transporter. Mid-level. There are 6 others like him working different regions." Morrison pulled up a map on the laptop. Red dots marked locations across the western states. "These are the holding sites we've identified from the phone data. W47 is the final collection point before they move the children overseas. Asia, Eastern Europe, forced labor, illegal adoptions. Worse." Sarah felt sick. "How many children are we talking about?" "Based on the messages, at least 200 over the last 15 years. The person running this, the one Richard answers to, goes by the name Mr. Z. No real identity, no face. Just a ghost who's been operating since at least 2010. The forensics team processed Richard's notebook. Inside were detailed records. 12 names, 12 ages. Status updates beside each one. Emma, in transport, test run. Sophie, transferred, location secure. Michael, at W47, ready. The list went on. Each child has a line item, each name followed by a cold, clinical assessment of their market value. At the back of the notebook was a phone number. When the FBI traced it, the number bounced through 7 different countries before going dark. But the last message received on Richard's encrypted phone gave them what they needed. The timestamp showed it was sent 30 minutes ago. November shipment delayed. If not at point in 90 minutes, entire batch will be disposed of. Disposed of. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. They weren't talking about evidence. They were talking about children. They had 1 hour left. Emma provided crucial details from the hospital: cold storage, airplane sounds, ocean smell mixed with oil. Agent Morrison cross-referenced the information. There was only one place within 15 kilometers that fit all criteria: the old shipping yard near the municipal airport, the same place where container W-47 was registered. The tech unit worked frantically, triangulating the last known location of Richard's contact phone before it went dark. The signal had pinged from the shipping yard 4 hours ago. Morrison assembled 3 tactical teams, 12 officers, 2 K-9 units in addition to ACE. Medical personnel on standby. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a race against a clock that had already started counting down. Sarah looked at Ace. The German Shepherd sat alert, watching her, waiting for the command he knew was coming. She knelt down, let him smell Emma's jacket one more time. The scent of the container, the other children, the place where fear lived in every breath. "Find them, boy. We're going to find them." On the laptop screen, a map of the shipping yard glowed. Over 300 abandoned containers spread across 2 square kilometers. No cameras, no lights. The perfect place to hide a crime. And somewhere in that maze of rust and shadows, 11 children waited in the dark, not knowing if anyone was coming. Not knowing that a 7-year-old girl and a police dog had already set their rescue in motion. At the hospital, Emma sat in a pediatric examination room while Dr. Rachel Torres conducted a full medical assessment. The bruises told their own story: purple-yellow fingerprints around her throat, red marks on both wrists, shallow cuts on her knees from being forced to kneel on rough concrete, dehydration, mild malnutrition. 72 hours without proper food or water had left her weak, but the physical damage would heal. The psychological damage would take longer. Dr. Torres noted how Emma flinched at sudden movements, how her gaze tracked every person who entered the room, how her breathing accelerated when anyone approached too fast. Classic signs of acute trauma. But Emma wanted to talk. Needed to talk. Because talking meant the others might still be saved. She told Dr. Torres what she remembered, grabbed from behind. The cloth smelled sweet, chemical. When consciousness returned, she was in the container with the others. A girl named Sophie, maybe 13, had been there longest. Sophie tried to keep everyone calm, told the younger ones not to make noise because it angered the man. Michael was 9, taken from a park. Lily and her sister Anna, 7 and 10, grabbed walking to school. Dylan, 8, lured from a birthday party with promises of puppies. Different stories, same pattern. Vulnerable moments, adult predators, children who vanished before anyone could react. Emma described the container: metal walls sweating moisture, a bucket in the corner. The single bulb stayed on constantly, harsh and humming. The sound of other containers being moved, metal scraping metal. Every few hours, planes roared overhead. "He said I was the test," Emma said, voice barely holding. "If nobody noticed me with him, they'd move everyone else the same way. Shopping malls, airports, train stations, places where people don't look twice." Dr. Torres wrote quickly, her hand unsteady as the operation's scope became clear. These weren't opportunistic kidnappings. This was industrial trafficking with logistics rivaling legitimate businesses. Before Sarah left to join the rescue team, she stopped by Emma's room. The girl looked small in the hospital bed, IV line in her arm, parents on either side holding her hands. Emma's mother hadn't stopped weeping since the call. Her father looked aged 10 years in 3 days. "Officer Sarah," Emma said quietly. "The others told me to go if I got the chance. Sophie said someone had to get out so people would know. I promised I'd bring help. Her expression crumpled. You have to save them. Sarah knelt beside the bed. Ace and I are going right now. We're bringing them home. The FBI command center operated with controlled urgency. Agent Morrison stood at a digital board showing the network they'd uncovered. 7 transporters working across 5 states, 3 regional coordinators who managed the logistics, and at the top, unreachable and unnamed, Mr. Z. The phone data revealed a sophisticated operation. Each transporter had a territory. Richard Hayes covered the Pacific Northwest. The others worked different regions across the country. They never communicated directly with each other, only with their assigned coordinator. The coordinators used encrypted apps that deleted messages after 24 hours. But the tech team had recovered fragments from Richard's phone before the auto-delete kicked in, enough to piece together the structure, enough to understand how 42 children had vanished without triggering a coordinated interstate investigation. They'd been careful, never taking more than 2 or 3 children from the same city, spacing the abductions across months, targeting kids from working families where parents had jobs that kept them busy, where a few hours of unsupervised time was normal, kids whose disappearances wouldn't immediately connect to a pattern. Container W-47 served as the final collection point. Children were held at smaller locations first, scattered across the region. Then, when they had enough for a shipment, they were transferred to W-47 to await transport. The notebook indicated these shipments happened every 2 to 3 months, 12 to 15 children at a time. The overseas destinations varied. Coded references suggested forced labor in textile factories in Southeast Asia. Illegal adoptions arranged through corrupt agencies in Eastern Europe. Some entries were marked simply as domestic placement, which Morrison explained meant they never left the country, sold instead to predators willing to pay premium prices for American children. The financial records they'd seized showed transactions in cryptocurrency, hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through digital wallets that bounced across international borders. This wasn't just trafficking. It was a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. But right now, none of that mattered as much as 11 children in a container, waiting in the cold. The shipping yard was 15 kilometers away. The tactical teams were already moving, and somewhere in that industrial graveyard, a timer kept counting down toward a decision someone had already made. Dispose of the evidence. All of it. 3 black SUVs rolled through the industrial district without sirens, without lights. Sarah sat in the lead vehicle with Ace beside her, the German Shepherd's body tense with focused energy. Agent Morrison rode in the second vehicle, coordinating with the tactical teams through encrypted radio. They'd briefed the approach strategy. 3 entry points to cover the yard. Teams 1 and 2 would seal the perimeter, blocking every road in and out. Team 3, Sarah's team, would go directly to the container zone with Ace leading the search. Sarah checked her gear. Vest secured. Service weapon loaded. Flashlight tested. Ace wore his tactical harness with a body camera mounted on the chest strap, transmitting everything he saw back to the command vehicle. If they found the children, the footage would serve as evidence. If they didn't, it would document what they'd tried. Morrison's voice crackled through the radio. All units, we're 10 minutes out. Remember, these children have been through hell. Move fast, but don't scare them more than they already are. Sarah looked at Ace. The dog's eyes met hers with absolute certainty. He was ready. They both were. But ready didn't mean confident about what they'd find when they opened that container. The shipping yard sprawled before them like a metal graveyard. Rusted containers stacked 3 high in some places, scattered randomly in others. No lights. No security. Just rows and rows of abandoned steel boxes that all looked the same in the darkness. Ace jumped from the SUV the moment Sarah opened the door. She held Emma's jacket in front of his nose one more time, letting him process the scent profile. The container. The other children. The specific signature of fear and confinement. Ace's head snapped up. He moved, not running but purposeful, nose to the ground, then lifting to test the air. He wove between containers, ignoring some completely, pausing briefly at others before moving on. Sarah followed with 3 tactical officers, weapons ready, flashlights cutting through the night. 200 meters in, Ace stopped. His posture changed, ears forward, tail rigid. A low whine escaped his throat as he sat down in front of a blue-gray container marked W47. The paint was faded, the numbers barely visible, but the lock on the door was brand new. Sarah moved to the door. Federal agents. If anyone's inside, step back from the door. Silence. Then, so quiet it was almost missed, a child's voice. Please help us. The bolt cutters made quick work of the lock. Sarah pulled the container door open, and the smell hit first. Sweat. Fear. Waste. The single bulb inside flickered weakly, casting shadows across 11 faces that stared back with hollow eyes. Medical personnel rushed forward with blankets and water. The children recoiled, pressing against the back wall. A girl, maybe 13, stepped in front of the younger ones, arms spread protectively. Sophie. It's okay, Sarah said softly. We're police. Emma sent us. Emma's safe. We're here to take you home. At Emma's name, Sophie's defenses cracked. Her arms dropped, her legs buckled, and she sank to her knees, weeping. The other children followed, the trauma releasing all at once in waves of grief and relief. But Sarah's radio erupted with urgent voices. Team 2, we've got movement. White van, east perimeter, attempting to breach. Morrison's voice cut through. Intercept. Do not let that vehicle leave. Sarah looked at the tactical officer beside her. Stay with the children. She ran. Ace ran with her. They sprinted through the container maze toward the east fence line, where headlights cut through the darkness. The white van had crashed through a weak section of fencing, metal screeching as it accelerated toward the main road. Team 2's SUV moved to block, but the van swerved, clipping the vehicle's rear bumper and continuing. Sarah's vehicle came from the opposite direction, forcing the van to brake hard. The driver threw it in reverse, tires screaming. Ace didn't wait. He launched himself at the van's open window, snarling, forcing the driver to jerk the wheel. The van jumped the curb, struck a concrete barrier, and stopped dead. Officers swarmed the vehicle. The driver tried to run, but Ace cut him off, teeth bared, blocking every direction. The man raised his hands. In the back of the van, they found 3 more children, bound, gagged, terrified. Morrison pulled the driver's wallet. No ID, but a phone in his pocket showed recent texts. One message stood out. Batch 11 secured. Moving to secondary location. Buyer confirmed for domestic placement. They'd caught him mid-operation, not just rescuing the children in the container, but intercepting the next shipment. Emma's position as number 12 on the original list suddenly made horrifying sense. There was supposed to be a 12th child in that container, but Emma had escaped, so they'd grabbed a replacement, and 2 more for profit. 2 days later, the hospital's conference room looked different. Not sterile and cold, but filled with balloons, stuffed animals, and the faces of families who'd been given back what they thought they'd lost forever. 11 children from the container, 3 from the van. Emma. 15 lives pulled back from the edge. Sophie held her mother so tight it looked like she'd never let go. Michael's father kept touching his son's face, confirming he was real. Lily and Anna's grandmother sat between them, 1 girl on each side, moisture streaming down her weathered face. Each reunion carried the same weight. Disbelief. Relief. Joy mixed with the knowledge of what could have been. Emma sat in a wheelchair, still recovering, but her gaze searched the room until she found who she was looking for. When the nurse brought Ace in, still wearing his tactical harness, Emma's face transformed. She held out her arms, and the German Shepherd walked directly to her, placing his head in her lap. "You found them," Emma whispered into his fur. "You kept my promise." Sarah stood near the back, watching. Agent Morrison joined her, holding a tablet. 3 of the 7 transporters in custody, 2 coordinators arrested. The financial trail is leading us to at least a dozen buyers. "Mr. Z?" Morrison's expression darkened. "Still a ghost. But we've shut down this operation. 15 kids home. Dozens more who won't be targeted because this network doesn't exist anymore." A reporter approached, camera crew in tow. "Officer Mitchell, the public wants to know about the hero dog." Sarah shook her head. "Ace did his job. But the real hero is a 7-year-old girl who refused to give up, who remembered a signal her teacher taught her, and who had enough courage to keep giving it even when she thought nobody was watching." Emma's parents approached, her mother's expression still raw. "How do we thank you? How do we thank him?" "You already have. You taught Emma about that signal. You gave her the tools to save herself. That's what saved all of them." 3 months passed. The trial dates were set. Richard Hayes and 4 others faced federal charges that would put them away for life. The investigation continued to spread, uncovering similar operations in 6 other states. The Signal for Help campaign, once a quiet nonprofit effort, exploded across social media as Emma's story went viral. Schools nationwide began teaching the signal, one hand raised, thumb tucked into palm, 4 fingers folding over. A silent SOS that required no words, no sound, just the hope that someone, somewhere, would be paying attention. On a Saturday morning that looked nothing like that day at the mall, a ceremony took place at the city police headquarters. The mayor stood at a podium, a blue velvet box in her hands. "Today, we honor extraordinary service in the line of duty. Officer Sarah Mitchell and K9 Ace are awarded the Medal of Valor for their actions that led to the rescue of 15 children and the dismantling of an international trafficking network." The audience filled every seat and lined the walls. 15 families, media from across the country, and Emma, standing at the front with the other rescued children, holding a handmade sign that read, "Thank you, Ace." Ace sat beside Sarah in his dress harness, the medal attached to the fabric. He didn't understand ceremonies or medals. He understood that the small human who'd needed help was safe now, that the others were safe, that the fear scent he'd detected at the mall no longer clung to any of them. Emma approached the podium with Sophie beside her. The older girl had become Emma's fierce protector, and they'd formed a bond that trauma had forged and survival had sealed. Emma's voice, stronger now than it had been in that hospital room, carried through the speakers. "I didn't know if anyone would see my signal. I almost didn't do it because I was so scared. But I remembered what my teacher said. Sometimes the quietest voices need the loudest advocates. Ace heard me when I couldn't speak. He saw me when I thought I was invisible." She looked at the audience, at the cameras broadcasting this moment to millions. "If you see someone giving this signal, don't ignore it. Don't walk past. Be like Ace. Pay attention. Because sometimes, being seen is the difference between being saved and being lost forever." The room erupted in applause, but Sarah barely heard it. She watched Ace, who'd moved closer to Emma, letting the girl rest her hand on his head. This was why they did the work, not for medals or recognition, for moments like this, for children who got to grow up instead of disappear. After the ceremony, Emma's mother presented Sarah with a photo. It showed Emma and Ace in the hospital, the girl's arms wrapped around the dog's neck, both of them looking directly at the camera. On the back, Emma had written in careful letters, "My friend, forever." The sun set on another Saturday evening, and in a park across town, Emma threw a tennis ball. Ace chased it, brought it back, and Emma laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from joy instead of survival. Her parents watched from a bench nearby, and for the first time in months, they didn't watch her with fear. They watched her with hope. Sarah had said it from the beginning, and it remained true. Ace had never been wrong. When he stopped that day in the mall, when he focused on a 7-year-old girl making a signal most people would miss, he'd done more than find one victim. He'd exposed a network, saved 15 lives, and reminded everyone watching that heroes don't always speak. Sometimes they just need to be seen. And sometimes, the most powerful voice is the one that never makes a sound.